Have you ever been the dumbest person in the room? Sam Tripoli has.
My theory on our reality is every movie you've ever watched in your life all going on at the same time.
But when he sat down with Joe Rogan, it was hard to tell who held the title. So sit back, relax, and watch as these two go blow for stupid blow. First up, Joe Rogan's a Christian now, and he thinks he's got a hot new take on the origin of humans.
That's where it gets weird, because nobody wants to even consider the possibility that we have been genetically engineered. No one wants to consider it because it's kind of crazy. But also, guys, look how different we are than everything else.
Yes.
I mean, it's kind of weird.
God's an alien who engineered human beings? You don't say. Hey, wait just 1 minute. I've heard that before. And I don't know if Joe thinks he's the only one who has seen Ancient Aliens, but that show gets hundreds of thousands of views, and the reruns are on Netflix. Plus the 1976 book The 12th Planet by Zecharia Sitchin, which popularized the idea of ape-alien hybrids, has sold millions. So it is safe to say that the idea has already wasted the time of millions of people as they sat there and considered the possibility. And this really isn't any different than believing in God-guided evolution, sometimes called theistic evolution, and I shit you not, something like 2 billion people believe that. And it doesn't really matter that Joe went soft and conformed long ago and is now trying to hide it with edgy twists like Alien Jesus. He still thinks an imaginary thing from an imaginary place created humans. Next, Sam jumps in without his floaty and agrees with Joe before dog paddling toward the "if man evolved from monkeys, why are there still monkeys" end of the pool.
Kind of weird.
Yes, and they can't explain the jump from monkey to man.
But Joe corrects him and brings up the fossil record because Joe likes to pervert scientific facts in order to sound smarter than his friends.
Oh, there's links. I mean, there are transitionary fossils. Like, you can see, like, Australopithecus, you can see the different ones, but there's a lot of weirdness in there that it doesn't cover, and one of them is the doubling of the human brain size.
Oh, here we go. Now it's time for a graphic because I smell a God of the Gaps fallacy. All right, now imagine this. You tell someone that humans evolved slowly over a long period of time through genetic variation and selection pressures. And they say, yeah, but do you see this gap? Somewhere in this gap, I think God intervened. Then you fill that gap with more fossil evidence, further proving the slow march of evolution. And they say, well, look at all these gaps now. All these gaps prove God went to work. It's obvious. And then you say, well, what about you because you're easily provoked? Or maybe you keep your cool and you say, where's your proof that God did something in this gap? And they say, where's your proof that God didn't do something in this gap? And then you would definitely be filled with murderous rage. And nobody will have learned anything because nobody ever does except for you, who will have learned yet another tough lesson about the consequences of talking to people. And all that stuff about we don't know why the human brain is bigger and more complex than our ancestors of 2 million years ago isn't really true. The debate is more about what selection pressures came into play, with the consensus being it was likely a mix of things like changing climate, more access to calorie-dense food, having to navigate social pressures from living in large groups, and tool and fire usage. But that's just what all the experts say. And hey, they don't even tell funny jokes when they're explaining it. So you know what? On second thought, maybe a creature from light years away invented the technology to travel between the stars, journeyed to Earth, and gave the smelly apes magic mushrooms before coming into them in the biblical sense. Or maybe I should say went into them. But either way, they put it into them.
Maybe mushrooms are aliens, and that's real possible, that it's an alien life form that, like, exists on our planet and gives you enlightenment.
Next up, geoengineering, because Joe and Sam still want to know what in the world are they spraying, and why in the world they spray it on themselves.
What about what they're spraying in the skies that now is an acceptable fact that they're doing geoengineering of our skies? Like 5 years ago, you were a crazy conspiracy theorist. Now there's laws being passed about it.
Sam is right. Recent laws in Florida and Tennessee have passed that ban spraying things into the atmosphere to alter temperature, weather, or sunlight. But this is an appeal to authority fallacy, which is shameful for Sam. Saying that nefarious geoengineering must be real because the government made a law against it does not prove weather modification and chemtrail conspiracies, but it does make me laugh because Sam has a long history of not trusting what the government tells him. But all of a sudden, when he thinks it helps him prove his point, He's an institutionalist. The reason lawmakers in Florida passed this law is because they were receiving a lot of complaints about the clouds of frozen airplane exhaust in the sky known as contrails. The complainants feared that the shadow group known as they were spraying them with chemicals that weakened their minds, made them capitulate to tyrants, and attack their gonads, making them less fertile. And now that the law has passed, state politicians are finding out what happens to populist candidates when the will of the people demands airplanes fly with their engines off. If you like to laugh at dumb people because it makes you feel good on the inside, download the X app and type Florida chemtrails into the search bar. Floridians cannot believe the bad guys are still spraying them like bugs after their white knight Ron DeSantis promised to save them. It's like they always have this like tickle in their throat. The sky should be blue, but it's hazy, and I can't like even really think straight, and I try to read and I really can't understand what I'm reading. It's, you know what I'm saying. If you don't know, you're about to know. Contrails are created when the hot-ass air from jet engines meets the cold-ass air at high altitudes. The water in the hot-ass air is almost instantly frozen, forming a contrail. If the cold-ass air is dry, the contrail dissipates quickly. If the cold-ass air is humid, the contrail lingers as a man-made cloud. Are contrails pollution? Yes. Do they block the vibrations of the sun from harmonizing with your butt chakra? No.
Sorry, you gotta see my tits, dude.
And now Sam is finally going to reveal some of the members of Big They. First off, he explains why they make us feel normal human emotions.
So my whole theory is that anxiety and depression and anger and all that stuff comes from when your programming and your reality clash and they don't meet up. You're programming from generational trauma, you're programming from school, all that stuff meets reality, and you start to just go a little crazy. And I think a lot of that is purposeful to get us on pharmaceuticals for life.
Now let's pull the mask off these sons of bitches and see who they really are.
You think it's purposeful? So how would they engineer that to happen that way?
Well, first of all, your grandparents, your parents telling you the trauma of your past, beating that into you forever.
It turns out it was Sam's parents and grandparents conspiring with pharmaceutical companies all along. The evil bastards were trying to get Sam hooked on drugs for life. And you know what? I kind of had a feeling.
The world's ran by sorcerers.
Now I must go over some tired old shit because I don't want you to ever trust what either Joe or Sam say about science, technology, history, or medicine, or anything else ever again. First up, Joe does something called anchoring to an anomaly in his thinking about 9/11.
But the actual hijacking itself, do you think that those guys that we found, luckily, it was like an amazing coincidence that even though everything from the plane was destroyed in an incredible burning inferno, his passport magically floated safely to the ground. Was it singed at all?
Yeah.
Was it even singed?
Joe says that we were lucky to have found that passport, implying that the passport is a key piece of evidence, and also implying that an agent from Big They planted it on the streets because it's not believable that even a partial passport could have survived that crash. And I agree. It is hard to believe. The recovery of Saddam al-Suqami's passport is weird and wild stuff. Almost as weird and wild as some of Joe's fantasies about alien encounters.
Guys are getting fucked by female aliens. Female aliens like hold them down, riding their dick, and like actually having sex with them.
But the passport didn't matter. It wasn't an important piece of evidence, and even without it, they would have ID'd the hijackers just as quickly. Hey, check this out. All 19 9/11 hijackers used their real names to obtain real visas and real passports that they used to buy real one-way tickets on a real airplane. And there's also video evidence of these guys going through security checkpoints before getting on those planes. And all this made it very easy for investigators to ID these guys and trace them to the Hamburg cell, an Islamist extremist group in Hamburg, Germany, which then linked them to Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. And Joe should probably know all that because it's been 24 fucking years. But instead he clings to the one anomaly that didn't even really fucking matter because he's a bullshitter. Next up, we've got the moon landing. And we've also got some Dunning-Kruger action going on because the uneducated often do not know what they don't know. And because these guys don't know shit about much, they both have a flaming case of confirmation bias, which stops them from learning about things that prove them wrong, like S-band radio signals.
And how'd you talk to Nixon on the phone from space?
On a landline.
How are you calling Nixon from fucking space? Stop.
Yep.
All Deep breath. S-band microwave radio signals were developed in the 1940s and 50s for use in military radar systems. In the late 50s, NASA began developing space communication technology using the S-band frequency. Then in 1962, NASA pulled off a feat much more impressive than a phone call from the moon when they sent the Mariner 2 spacecraft past the planet Venus. While flying by Venus, Mariner 2 measured things like surface temperature, thermal radiation, and cosmic rays using its onboard instrumentation. And Mariner 2 didn't come back to Earth. That bitch is long gone. So all of that info was sent back to Earth from Venus, which is 26 million miles away, using an S-band radio transmitter. On Earth, the weak signal was picked up by the deep space network of huge freaking antenna placed strategically all around the world. Pretty badass, yeah? Took its freaking temperature from 26 million miles away. Damn! That should make it easier to understand how 7 years later, and only 250,000 miles away, they could send voice signals back and forth between Earth and the moon. So here's a quick breakdown just for Joe and Sam, because I know those two clowns are watching. The Apollo 11 astronauts talked into radios in their suits, and that signal relayed through the antenna on the lunar module, traveled at the speed of light to one of the big antennas on Earth, was sent to mission control in Houston via underwater cables and satellites, and then from Houston, the signal was piped to a special phone that had been installed in the White House for just this occasion. And when Nixon said, "Congratulations, boys," that signal was sent back to the moon along the same route. And even though that technology is well understood, Joe tries to dismiss it by saying, "Stop."
Yep.
And now I must talk some shit. You probably know Joe's favorite subject to spread misinformation about is the COVID-19 pandemic, especially COVID vaccines, COVID policies, and he also loves Robert Kennedy Jr. because he's a dumb old guy with big muscles too. A reoccurring theme on the Joe Rogan podcast is Joe thinks pharmaceutical companies are some kind of hive-minded creature comprised of millions of scientists, doctors, and public health experts who are poisoning everyone for money and are also great at keeping secrets.
I think people can keep secrets.
And I was going to get all into it and make my own video about Joe and RFK and COVID, and it would probably be boring, and instead I'm just going to recommend some videos from other people who are better at explaining it than me. All I really want to talk about is this clip right here.
I wonder how they're going to look at some of the things that pharmaceutical drug companies have pushed through in the future and the impact that it had on kids, and whether or not they're going to think of that in a similar way to child sacrifice.
Let me tell you a story real quick. In 1881, President James Garfield was shot by a Looney Tune named Charles Guiteau. A bullet entered President Garfield's torso without hitting any major organs. Had he been rushed to a modern hospital, he would have lived, no problem. But instead, he was placed under the care of Dr. D. Willard Bliss. In 1881, germ theory was not fully accepted, and guess what? Dr. Bliss was one of the physicians who thought germs were bullshit. Why should we be afraid of something we can't see, he said. And even though the use of antiseptics and good hygiene practices was proving to be very successful in Europe, Dr. Bliss said something like, "This is America, baby. We don't take no fucking directions from no fucking Europeans." Then he chanted USA and stuck his dirty little fingers into President Garfield's wound, trying to fish out the bullet. What followed was an infection followed by blood poisoning. Over the next 11 weeks, President Garfield died a horrible death under the care of Dr. Bliss. The president was racked with fever and losing weight. Unable to eat, Garfield's doctor put whiskey, milk, egg yolks, and beef broth up his butt. And that wasn't going to fix him, but it might have hydrated him enough to prolong his misery by a day or two. And this is how history will remember Joe Rogan and the quacks like Robert Malone, Peter McCullough, Brett Weinstein, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that he has promoted. History will look at these nincompoops and equate them with the germs are fake, let's put some food up his butt crowd. Alright, that's it. This is the time of the show where I ask you to please support the channel by liking, subscribing, leaving a comment. If you're feeling generous, please contribute to the Patreon. If you liked this video, there should be another one popping up right now on your screen. My name is Greb Kered, your ally in the fight against disinformation.